Now we have coming up next Dr. Michele Kong presenting from awareness to action. What can we do for our students with invisible disability? Please join us in welcoming Dr. Michele Kong.
Hey, good afternoon. I'm so excited to be spending this hour, well, I guess 45 minutes with you guys. I've really enjoyed the presentation before. Thank you. So, what I really wanted to share with the group this afternoon is really how we think about the ways that we can serve our students with invisible disability. I wanted to take a little bit of a bigger approach and just give an overview of the gap that we currently have, the challenges that we have with students with invisible disabilities, what we've done, and what we can do moving forward for all other schools, whether it is from elementary school all the way to honestly college or university level. I think the key, and it especially I think pertains to us working in sort of the disaster setting or in a pandemic setting where really prevention versus reaction is going to be very critical to the success of whatever we do as providers. And so that's why, when I was thinking about the title, from awareness to action was something that really jumped out at me for this discussion. Next slide. So, first of all, I wanted to just say that within our current, what we know currently, 1 in 4 individual has an invisible disability. Obviously, this doesn't just relate to students per se, but really in general, including all of us that are currently in this audience. When we talk about invisible disability, really what we are making reference to would be any sort of disability that's not visible to the eye. So, for instance, if you are an amputee or you have a missing limb, we would consider that as a physical disability where it's something that's visible and you can see. But someone with an invisible disability often relates to what is in the brain. So it can include a whole spectrum of diagnosis from autism to PTSD. A student that's gone through abuse or domestic violence, for instance, could experience PTSD, whether it's even at the hospital and certainly at school, ADHD, sensory processing disorder, or other ones. The commonality amongst a lot of these different diagnoses is that often they have a very unique communication, social, and also a sensory profile. And oftentimes, because they are invisible, they can often go unrecognized. And if you don't recognize it, when there is a trigger, whether it's a macro situation, such as there's a hurricane or there's a fire, or perhaps it's a micro situation where it's at a smaller personal level, it can create real problems because if the person who is engaging with the student or with this individual is not aware of the things that's going on, they may misinterpret behaviors or communication strategies that are used may be inappropriate or ineffective for that particular encounter. Next slide. And so I wanted to just kind of broadly go over the different sensory processing impairment. The first, there are many different ways of thinking about them, but in big buckets of category, these are ones where you can put students in terms of their sensory profiles and what that means. So somebody who is an over responder or who are easily over responsive are those who are overwhelmed by sensation. So this might be somebody, for instance, who, when it's really loud or really bright, you get overwhelmed by it. So for instance, if you're in a room or perhaps in a classroom that's really loud with lots of different activities going on, for a particular student who is neurotypical, they maybe still be able to focus on the teacher, or if there is a fire going on, they can focus on the person who is giving the warning and giving the instruction. Whereas for somebody who's easily overwhelmed by their senses, who's an over responder, all they can hear are all the different noises, whether it's the fan or certainly the drill or someone talking next to them and things like that. Now, an under responder is the complete opposite of that, in that they may miss certain sensory cues. So, an example of under responder would be if I were to call somebody by the name of Alex, I might say, "Hey, Alex," and Alex would turn to me. But if Alex is an under responder, Alex may not turn to me and may just continue on. And so, not understanding this can make it really difficult in trying to help someone in a moment of duress. An under responder could also be somebody who, for instance, have this unbalanced proprioceptive or vestibular system. And so because they're an under responder, what you may see them do is they shake a lot, or they jump up and down a lot, or they may be spinning a lot, or they may be, moving at a very rapid pace. The reason why they do that is because that's the only way they can sort of regulate themselves, because they are actually under responder. A sensory seeker is a person who craves stimulation. So they would be someone who, for instance, maybe that fidgets a lot or touches certain things a lot because they're seeking that sensory input. Sometimes you can have individuals or students with discrimination or motor impairment profiles, and what that means is that they have trouble responding to the input with their body. So what I mean by that, for instance, is there are some who they will describe as in they don't really feel their body or their position in space. So, for instance, their brain might say, okay, move your right arm, but the body doesn't quite move the right arm. And so there's a disconnect there between what the brain is thinking and what the body actually does. Now, these are, broad categories of sort of sensory profiles. And what we've realized with experience and also with just what we know within this field is that often an individual will have a mix sort of profile of all these different four things. But each one will uniquely have their own. And if you understand pieces of it, then you will be able to then come up with a profile that fits the individual. And because of that, then you'll be able to learn how to respond and react to that person, especially when at a time of need. Next slide. Here, is the notion of sensory overload. What puts somebody in an overload situation? So what happens here, a way to think about it is to think about it as sort of a traffic jam in the brain. Another way to think about it for coffee drinkers, if you use a filter, you will understand this analogy where, oftentimes even as you're sitting here listening to me, for instance, you might have the fan going. Perhaps if you're in the office, there's somebody else talking in the background. Like for instance, just now, someone just came through the door, and so it could have been really distracting. But if you are able to filter all this information, it filters through this sort of coffee filter, and then it comes out with an appropriate output, which for you and I right now is to sort of listen to me as I'm talking. But for someone who doesn't have this filtering response, it sort of causes a jam in the brain where everything just sort of gets stuck. And what you will see as an observer is you can either have a fight or flight response, or sometimes you can have the opposite, which is a freeze and a complete, like, not do anything sort of situation. The symptoms may also vary in terms of what you might see. You can see somebody who's sweating, somebody who's shut down, as I mentioned before, a meltdown. And ultimately, at the end of the day, our goal is to really restore homeostasis through tools and through support. Next slide. Um, I think, one of the things that is really key to important, and this is probably true for all of us, but it's certainly very true for individuals and students with a unique sensory profile, is that routine is really, really important. Now, as you and I know, when there's a disaster, what happens first is the predictability and the routine goes away because nobody plans for a disaster. A disaster happens when it happens. And so that in itself can also cause a lot of disruption and distress to the student, and may then lead to what we had talked about in the previous slide in terms of dysregulation, in terms of meltdown or an overload situation. I wanted to just talk specifically about communication because this is where it is key it's always key, but especially in these moments where your communication has to be very, very clear and literal instructions are really critical in order to get the message across. Because again, remember, they may be having difficulty with filtering, and so there's a jam going on. And so if you are confusing in your language, or if we are confusing in our language, then that really adds to the problem versus if you're very clear, very concrete, then it really, gets it across to them. It's also key to use, if you have it, to use visual support. And certainly all of this needs to be grounded in patience and in empathy. One of the things that we do in working with our schools is the foundation of it is training, and training covers a lot of these different elements that we've just briefly covered in the last 5 minutes or so, but it's also really key that it as part of the prevention that we have, or these schools, what we do is we equip them with visual supports and other supportive tools that they can use if a disaster should happen. Next slide. Some of the tools that we have also used is unique to Culture City. For those of you who don't know Culture City is a nonprofit organization that is national, that focuses on accessibility and inclusion. And Culture City works with many, many different sectors within the community, including schools. But the focus is often on how do you integrate families and individuals into the community. And so, in working with the PPN and UAB and the Department of Pediatric with Culture City, what we've been able to do is, in addition to developing this training that's specific for disasters for schools, we've also been able to leverage the Culture City's tools for these schools. The top one is the Culture City app, also known as Koji. This app is available on Samsung and on Apple, and it is free for downloads and for students, families, and staff to use. Within the app, it's really cool because there is a visual story builder within there. And so, what that allows is that you can actually build a story about a school. So, for instance, School A, we could build a story on School A that uses the visual images from School A. So, the principal, maybe the front of the building, maybe the bathroom, the hallway. Obviously, different schools look a little bit different, but it allows for the student who's using this visual story to see it in their native environment. The key about visual stories is that it tells the experience in a first language. So it will say something like, if a disaster happened, the school, this is the sound, this is what you might see. And it sort of lists out the story in a very concrete way so that a student can actually go through the experience by reading the story, even if the experience doesn't happen or never happens. And the idea behind it is to sort of prepare them and to be preventive. An AI talker within the Culture City app is a talker that is cloud-based. It models against kind of like Spotify, where, if you've used Spotify before, if you love a particular kind of music, Spotify will recognize that. And then, whenever you go back in, it will suggest music lists to you that's curated to what your preference is. So if I like country, it will suggest country music. If you like, rock and roll, it will suggest rock and roll musics. And so with Culture City's Koji Talker, what it does is that it will recognize. So you're going to put in, okay, I'm student A, I'm allergic to peanut, I'm very sensitive to loud noise. I need my, let's say they have a favorite fidget tool. I need my fidget tool when I'm upset. So you can put all those profile in. And so when you talk to the individual, particularly those who are who don't talk, who are non-speakers, this app allows for an ease of communication. Because basically, then what you'll do is that you will talk into the app, and then the student can look at the app and then pick their options of response. And so it allows for a visual cue, it allows for a verbal cue, and within that, a profile that recognizes who the student that's using who's using the app. Um, In addition to the communication app or the communication tool, all these schools that we've worked with also have sensory bags. And what these are curated bags with specific items within there. The most highly used item is probably the headphone. And so this is when, if a student is overwhelmed or, it's too loud, they can take the headphone and put it on. Now, some may say, well, if you use a headphone, usually they will have headphones with them, which is probably a true statement. But we also know that oftentimes, they might forget it, they might not bring it. Perhaps the headphone is left in their resource room, and then now they're in a different hallway, and their own headphone is far away. And so the availability of sensory bags within the school just allows for access to these items should a student need it, that doesn't rely on them having their own. Fidget tools are, could be a variety of different things, but basically things that sort of allows for a fidgeter to use for calm and comfort. We have glasses. These are often ray blocking glasses. If it's really bright, sometimes the light input can be overwhelming, and so they can wear glasses. A feeling thermometer is basically a visual cue card that allows them to say, oh, if I'm angry, for instance, but I'm not able to communicate that with you, I can point to the feeling thermometer, and it has a visual cue of angry, or somebody who's really sad, or upset, or perhaps is hungry, things like that. Idea being that it's a visual cue that allows for more rapid communication of feelings if they're not able to communicate, and if they don't have a phone at the moment with them that allows them to use the Culture City Koji Talker. Every school that has these sensory bags will have them strategically located in the school, so that it is often a central point where students and staff will have access to these tools when needed. Mobile sensory stations are actually pretty cool. So what they are is it's a unit that is probably about 3 feet tall, but it has all the different elements within the station that, for instance, there is a bubble tube or an air tube that has an air element that provides a visual cue. It's got sounds. Some of them have like fiber optic bands that allows you to sort of manipulate as well. The idea with a mobile sensory station is that you can take the station, put it in a room, and transform that room into sort of a calm space. So this has been really helpful, for instance, in situations where, let's say you have to, there's a disaster of sort, and you have to be quarantined in a space and you cannot leave. So mobile sensory station allows you to take that station into that room and transform that room into a sort of a sensory calm oasis. We actually use it a lot in the hospital. We use it a lot in event spaces, and certainly in schools, it's been really, really helpful. So all the schools that we've partnered with for the PPN initiative, all of them have at least one mobile sensory station, numerous sensory bags. And obviously, the Culture City app is one that they can download to their phone. One thing that I would also comment on is that all these tools really benefit not just the student, but adults as well. And so if you think about it, right, when I said 1 in 4 have an invisible disability, these honestly also includes the staff. It includes anybody that is within that school environment. So it's been really beneficial for all the different parties that are involved in the school. Next slide. The one of the big things that can be done, so foundational to all of this is obviously the training. The training allows you to understand who the students are, what their sensory profile is, how do you respond to, how do you engage with them, how do you interact with them. Layered upon the foundation of education and training, what we teach is then say, okay, now that you have that, look into your environment and how can you change or modify the environment and the interaction. One of the, key elements that we emphasize is, if possible, you always want to limit input, if possible, because especially at the time of a disaster, you might imagine it's going to be very, very chaotic, and the level of anxiety and duress is going to be high for everybody involved. So as best as you can, you want to try to minimize the sound, minimize the light, and really try to control crowd. This is not an easy thing to do, but if you can, crowd control is probably one of the most impactful strategies that you have. You always want to limit responders when safe. And so what this means is to say, you know, if you need 5 people to control the situation, then use 5 people. But if you truly only need one or two, please send the three away. And again, this goes back to sort of the crowd exposure, because often in these times of distress, less is going to be more. And by providing this sort of quieter, sensory, friendlier, inclusive spaces, it's going to really help calm not just the student, but oftentimes the staff as well. And to be, one thing that we've seen that is very impactful is for the staff, to be really mindful of the approach in terms of how we position ourselves in that situation. And this often comes down to our posture. So like our body posture, our hand movements, the tone that we use, and certainly the language that we use. One that I found was quite funny because one student actually pointed this out was, oftentimes we'll say, okay, this is a drill. And it's such a natural language to use, and you and I don't think too much of it, but the discussion surrounding the word drill. And so when you say this is a drill to someone who's a concrete thinker, they think of an equipment, right? It's an equipment that you use to drill something in. And so, to say something, this is a drill, is harder for them to understand and sort of get within that context. And it's easier to say, this is practice, or something along those lines. And so just be really mindful of our language as well. Next slide. This is the catch principle. It works well in applying to the situation when there is a problem. If there is a child or a student who is having a difficult time, before you rush to help, always ask for consent. And this can just be in the matter of, putting yourself down at their level, eye contact, not where they're down and you're up above, where you're looking down at them, and just, talk in the way to say, hey, I'm going to help you, and this is what's going on. Always approach in a very calm, using respectful body language. And then, T stands for tools, offering your sensory tools or your communication at aids. C is crowd away. Always try to minimize stimulation. And then help is looking to reassure and connect them to other resources. One of the things that, if you think about, why this is so important, right? That we equip our schools and our staff with this is, if you think about it this way. So when a student goes to school, their experience within that school day starts the minute, if they go on a bus, the minute they get on the bus and they come down the bus and go through the school door, right? Their experience really starts from that moment until they get to whatever room that they're going to. So there's hundreds and, multiple encounter that's happening in that just 5-minute journey or 10-minute journey from bus to school or to classroom. And so, if you only have a specialized teacher that understands how to engage with this students with invisible disability, if you only have an aide or a resource person who understands, or only the classroom teacher that understands, then it's a big problem because they're only there in the classroom. And so, what if this happened in the cafeteria, right? What if this happened at the hallway? What if this happened as they're entering the school doors? And so, while this program that we've developed in conjunction with PPN Culture City is meant for disaster preparedness. So if there's a big thing happening, right? Hurricanes, fires, tornadoes, things like that. It is all the principles and all the tools and strategies are just as impactful for all the different micro encounters that happen during a school day that doesn't involve disasters per se. And so it's been really cool to see it develop, and to see the students benefit and the staff also benefiting from it. Next slide. And so here I wanted to show just a couple of slides that kind of shows you what we've done in the pilot program. And so after we developed the program, what we did was we piloted it in several schools within the Birmingham area. The schools were pretty spread in terms of type of schools. So they were city schools. There were one that were a little bit more rural, and schools that specifically was for special needs students, and then schools that included students of all abilities. This was just looking at the people that underwent the training, and I don't think it's surprising, just sort of, knowing what our school system these days look like. The mean age of the participants were 40, they were almost 41. Median was 39. The youngest was 23 years old, and we had a 78-year-old participant. Most of them, 81% were female, only about 16% were male, and then the rest of them identify as non-binary. If you look at the roles that they were having, as you might imagine, 84% of them were faculty. Within the school system, we had about 6% that were administrators. So this would be, your principals, your vice principals, and people sort of in the office. Other school roles would just include your non-faculty members. So your custodian, for instance, or your cafeteria person will be in that category. Next slide. And then we looked at what about years of school experience? Are they young? Are they young? How many years have they been in school? And, are they new teachers? If you look at the mean, it's actually about 10 years. So they've been there a decade. The median was 8 years with minimum of less than a year, and the maximum one person who's been there 35 years, so a long time. And then we asked, do you have experience working with individuals with sensory needs or invisible disability? Majority of them said yes, and only a small percent of them said no. Next slide. We also did a pre-training for the school staff. The first question we asked was, how knowledgeable are you when it comes to issues related to invisible disability or sensory need? One being you have no knowledge, and 10 being you're extremely knowledgeable. So overall, out of all the staff that we engage with, the median was 7. Then we asked a very similar question, but slightly different in that, well, how comfortable are you? So not just knowledge, but how comfortable are you when you're interacting with someone with invisible disability? And the answer was also 7. And then when we said, how knowledgeable are you with alternative forms of communication? So what this means would be whether it's an AAP, like a device, or anything that's not verbal. The answer was 5. We then, with all these schools, we had many different encounters with them. So, the first encounter was establishing the relationship, building the relationship, and then, knowing, building a relationship with the administrator and then with the school staff. And then we would go in and do the training. And so numerous points of contact with the school. And then what we did was we did the training, provided them with the tools and the resources. And then after that, we came back again and then did a post-training survey with them. Next slide. Next slide. And then what you see here is all the scores went up. We asked the same thing. How knowledgeable are you? Knowledge level went up to 9 from 7. How comfortable are you? Went from 8 from 7. And then even in terms of the alternative form of communication, went from 5 to 8, which is the biggest jump in on this particular scale. Next slide. We also wanted to know, we said, okay, after this training, do you feel more prepared to assist an individual with sensory needs or invisible disability during disaster. So the first sort of row that you see there with a five. So this is what they said before the training. So this is pre-training, and they said, well, in terms of how prepared I am, I don't think I'm that prepared because it's five. We asked the same question again post-training, and for those after the training, out of 155 of them said yes, we feel more prepared now to assist an individual, and only two of them said no. So that was also really good to see. Next slide. We then kind of broke it down to session because we really wanted to have a little bit more of a granular breakdown of the program and see if there's something that was maybe not as useful that we could adapt or change. So we said, okay, the first section was general background on sensory needs and invisible disability. How useful was it? It was ranked of, one not being very useful, 10 being extremely useful on a scale of 1 to 10, 8. And then we said, what about understanding of senses response during a disaster? The rating was 9 out of 10. Communication strategy got a rating of 8 out of 10. And understanding how to respond to someone experiencing sensory overload was 9 out of 10. So this was, again, a very positive feedback for the program in that, it was between 8 to 9 out of 10 for level of usefulness for each of these sections. We also had a lot of both written and verbal feedback from administrators that and the faculty and staff, as well as families actually, that we took that has been very supportive and positive for the program. Next slide. And so, some final thoughts. I think at the end of the day, what we really wanted to acknowledge is the fact that, the school is supposed to be a safe space for for all our kids. And if you are of school age, you spend many hours in school. And we wanted to make sure that within the school system, that it's not just your teacher that understands you, your specific, aide that understands you. We want it to be, because if you have a disability that's invisible, we want it to be where everybody knows what that is, because then they can be truly preventive and be able to engage and interact with the student in the most effective, empathetic way that really tries to prevent a escalation rather than trying to de-escalate, and really, emphasizing that sensory accessibility and inclusion and safety is really for everyone, not just for our students, but really for our adults as well. We've certainly seen a an indirect effect on the school staff as well with this particular program. And I think at the end of the day, we've also realized that empathy and preparation makes all the difference in both the big situations and also all the micro situations, and that together we can build safer, more accessible schools. Next slide. And with that, I will end and take questions. We a whole lot of gratitude to the Pediatric Pandemic Network, UAB, the department, the staff here, and Culture City for putting all of this together. It's been really great doing this with the schools and seeing the impact on both the students, the families, and the staff as well. Lonnie, I see questions. Should I just take them? I wasn't sure because you were asking them before. Okay, I don't hear her, so I'm just gonna take the questions. Let's see. Um,
I'm sorry.
oh, that's okay. I wasn't sure what you wanted me to do.
Okay. So, when you go to schools, do you have any resistance to teachers that want to participate in the training?
You know, we so I think relationship building is key. The answer is that it has not been. And that's been really incredible to see because I think the first thing that we do when we go to these schools is that we really try to, show the gap and the need and the vastness of this problem and how it really can impact their students and them, and really emphasize that this is not just any other training, right? This is not just an additional 30 minutes you take or 40 minutes that you take. This is supposed to make your job easier as a teacher. Because if you understand this, if the faculty understand this, it's going to make it easier for you when you have such an encounter, because then you can build upon your own knowledge that you have, or maybe don't have, about how to engage and interact with with the students. And so, no, we haven't gotten individual pushback to say, like, now when I want to do this. What we have done very deliberately is that from top down, in making sure that from an administration standpoint, that there is complete buy-in. And because there is buy-in, it is not an optional thing. So it's not an option to say, you can take this if you want to. You don't have to take it if you don't want to. It's more saying, our school, we are committed to this. We know we need this, and it is mandatory for all the teachers and the staff and faculty to take it. And so that's actually been really good. So you certainly need to have buy-in from top, but also buy-in from ground level, because if it's just buy-in from the top and people don't really see the need or understand the need, then they don't implement it well, because they're like, okay, fine, I have to do it, but I'm not really paying attention. But if you can show the need, and then I think the other thing that's been really critical is stories. When we have positive stories, we immediately share it with them. We share it with the schools. And because they can see it, they're like, oh my gosh, I had a similar situation. This happened, that happened. And that's really powerful to have buy-in to for the program.
Well, thank you, Dr. Khan, for deepening our understanding of how educators and the community can better support students with invisible disability. Your training brings essential clarity and empathy to this important topic. So we thank you for all that you do.
Thank you.